Hello and welcome back to Movie Recap. In today's video, we will be watching the movie Cast Away. So, turn on subtitles and spoilers ahead. At the start of the movie, we see a FedEx package being delivered to a man. The package has a sticker of angel wings on it, and the receiver of the package says that it's from his wife, while he is already with some other woman. Moving on, our main character Chuck works as an systems analyst executive at FedEx. Chuck takes his job really seriously. He travels around the world and currently, he is in Russia to optimize the hub's productivity. And to do so, he sent a parcel to himself. Chuck Nolan is a man of strict schedules and deadlines. It means a lot for him to get the packages delivered to their owners on time. In the midst of all the chaosness in his personal life, he has managed to keep a long-term relationship with his girlfriend Kelly. Chuck calls Kelly from Russia to let her know that he'll be back home in Memphis in around 18 hours. Chuck then arrives in the US and meets up with Kelly. They are as loving a couple could be. They both look at each other, and Kelly knows what's going on. Chuck needs to leave for work again. At the airport, Kelly gives Chuck an old watch, a family heirloom, as a Christmas present. Chuck gets touched by Kelly's gift, and before leaving, he hands her a little box which she believes to be a ring. Chuck then tells her that they'll open it together on New Year's Eve when he returns, and goes to catch his flight. Chuck then flies alongside 4 flight crew members to Malaysia. A few hours into the flight, they run into a storm. Chuck hears the pilots talking about losing all radio coverage, and after that, something in the plane explodes which leads to a heavy turbulence in the flight. The plane starts to lose control, and one of the pilots, while trying to get Chuck to his seat, hits his head pretty badly. Chuck sees the ocean getting closer, and the plane crashes into the Pacific Ocean. The plane gets filled with water, and soon Chuck starts to drown. He uses the emergency inflatable life raft given to him by one of the pilots. With the help of that raft, Chuck manages to get himself afloat. But the weather is bad, and strong ocean waves start to hit him. It's a situation of life or death for Chuck. Luckily, Chuck survives and finds himself ashore on an uninhabited island. The emergency raft had barely managed to take Chuck on that island. Chuck gets out of the raft and sees that the watch is still with him. He also finds a few FedEx packages, which had been washed ashore. He picks up the packages and finds himself all alone, with no other island visible for miles ahead. Next day, he finds a few more packages. He finds coconuts on the island with which he quenches his thirst. He goes on to explore the island and finds a cave. He then climbs on top of the island to get a better view of everything. From above, he sees something in the water and quickly goes down to see what it is. But to his surprise, it's the dead body of the pilot who tried to save him. Chuck digs a burial place and places the dead body of the pilot inside it. On the third night, he sees a ship far away from the island. He calls out for help, but he is too far away for his voice to reach the ship. He flashes the small torchlight at the ship, but it is also of no help. To save his life, Chuck packs his things and rides the damaged raft in hopes of reaching the ship. But the tides are way too strong, and he gets thrown into the water. His leg gets cut on a coral reef, and he screams out in pain. Jesus respects Joe's bravery and agrees to assist the dudes. To shelter himself from the rain, he enters the cave which he discovered a couple of days back. Inside the cave, Chuck finds a small water stream and starts to drink water from it. Exhausted by the day, Chuck falls asleep, and the small torch also loses its power. Next day, he opens the packages in hopes of finding anything useful. In one of the packages, he finds a volleyball. He also finds a pair of skating boots and a dress. With the help of the boot, he can now cut coconuts easily, and he uses the dress to catch small fishes. Chuck keeps the package unopened to stay alive. Murphy will be there to pick her up. He tries for hours and hours, but gets no success. He ends up getting a cut on his hands, which finally breaks him. He throws everything in his sight and shouts to the top of his lungs. A few minutes later, he finds his blood-stained handprint on the volleyball. Chuck knees a face on the volleyball and sets it in front of him to make it look like he wasn't alone. He starts to talk to the ball, and after a while, he finally manages to light a fire. Chuck gets happy and starts to dance around the fire. He finally had something to be positive about. He names the ball Wilson. He uses the skating boot and a rock to get his teeth out, but loses consciousness in the process. It's been 4 years since he has been stuck on this island. One day, when he's sleeping in his cave, he hears a noise, and when he goes out to check, he finds a broken piece of a plastic door and brings it with him. Chuck has created a monthly chart to calculate the time. They're currently in February, and Chuck tells Wilson that they are getting out of there in April, when the sea waves will be in their favor. Chuck starts to prepare a wooden raft to get out from there. He also makes ropes out of tree skins and uses those ropes to, however, he didn't, and now the time has finally come. Chuck writes a message on a rock before boarding his ship with Wilson. He starts to row the raft to save itself from the strong waves. He fights with the waves and manages to keep the raft afloat. Chuck thinks that he has overcome all of the problems. He is happy, and he spends more days on that raft, and he doesn't have food to eat. So he drinks the rainwater collected in his raft, and he starts to catch fish to eat. Then one night, it starts to rain heavily, and Chuck holds onto the raft for his dear life. When the storm clears, the raft is in very bad shape, and Chuck cannot find Wilson. He cries out for the ball, which has been his only friend for over 4 years. Chuck starts to panic, and then he finally sees Wilson floating a little far away from the raft. He jumps into the water to save Wilson. He reaches out with his one hand to get to Wilson, with his other hand trying to keep a hold of the raft. The rope to the raft keeps getting out of his band, so Chuck has to stop to get it back. But in all this, Wilson has drifted further away from Chuck. He desperately tries, but he just cannot reach Wilson. In the end, Chuck loses hope of getting him back and cries out in pain of losing the only friend he had in the 4 years he spent on that island. Wilson is lost, and the raft is broken. There seems to be no hope for Chuck. Chuck gets sick and cannot even move. A whale sprays water on him, and we see a ship passing behind him. Chuck finally opens his eyes and turns back to see a huge cargo ship passing by. After all the troubles and misfortunes he suffered, Chuck finally gets saved. 4 weeks later, Chuck is flying to go back to his home and meet his family and Kelly. His friend tells him that everyone had thought he was dead, and so they held a funeral for him. After landing, he gets to meet a person who he doesn't seem to recognize. The person then introduces himself as Kelly's husband. He tries to explain that Kelly was too emotional and confused to see him. Chuck stays there silent, without knowing what to say or do. The love of his life, who he kept in thought while surviving on that island for more than 4 years, had married someone else. Chuck can't even sleep on his bed. He lays on the ground, staring at the same watch which Kelly had given him years back. So he takes a taxi to Kelly's house. Just as Chuck is about to ring the doorbell, Kelly opens the door and invites him inside. Chuck wants to say something, but Kelly immediately hugs him. Chuck hands her the watch she gave him as a present, and Kelly is shocked to see that he still had it. Since it's a family heirloom, Chuck wants Kelly to keep her watch. Kelly then shows him that she had kept his car after he had gone missing. She hands him the car keys, and Chuck gets inside the car. Chuck starts to drive away, and Kelly realizes she still has more to say. She calls out to Chuck and starts running towards him. Chuck also gets out of his car. Kelly says that after 4 years of him being lost, she had to let him go, but she always loved him and will always continue to do so. Chuck says that he too loves her, but he knows that it's too late for them to get back together. Kelly also cannot leave her family behind. At the end of the movie, we see him driving. He is going to deliver all the packages he opened on the island. He stops at a house and fails to find anyone. So he leaves a package at the door with the message, "This package saved my life. Thank you, Chuck Nolan." While driving back, Chuck stops to take a look at the map. He is thinking about where to go next. Then, a woman stops her car and asks if she can help him. Chuck asks where the road ahead of him leads to. The woman answers his question and then goes back to her car. When she drives away, Chuck notices the same angel wings on the back of her truck, which was on the package he didn't open on that island. The package which saved his life by giving him motivation to stay alive belonged to the woman he just met, and she. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel to never miss out on our future videos.